Well, for more on the fate of Flight 8501, we're joined now by our special correspondent James Chau in Indonesia. Welcome, James. Thanks for joining us. So at this time, has there been any more news or, of course, any trace? We were just mentioning now that there may be some wreckage that's been found. And what's the situation at the Surabaya airport where you are or where you have been?
Well, Edmund, a couple of new updates at this hour. First of all, we're just hearing that the Indonesian President Joko Widodo is about to head to the National Search and Rescue Headquarters here in Jakarta, and that meeting is expected to take place at any moment. Whether that indicates there's been any major developments either in that sighting, as you just mentioned, or in other aspects of the search and rescue, we have to wait and see on that. But let's get back to that sighting earlier in the day. The first reports came about 2.5 hours ago by the Australian Navy that objects were sighted in the Java Sea. What is significant so far is that the Vice President Yusuf Kalla has confirmed that news publicly in a press conference in Surabaya. Also, we know that the sighting has occurred in an area of interest within the Java Sea. So those are two key developments. But let's look at also why this plane may have lost contact in the first place early on Sunday morning. One of the suggestions could be linked to the request for a change in course, in fact a rise to 38,000 feet in altitude by the plane's pilot shortly before it lost contact with air traffic control. We understand that that request was put on hold. Whether that could be linked, though, to the fact that that area at that time was quite overcrowded with other civilian aircraft, we have to wait and see also. Over in Juanda Airport, meanwhile, relatives of the 162 passengers and crew on board QZ8501 are still waiting very much for that news to come through. The longer this search is taking, of course, the less likely it is that the plane can be found intact or any survivors. AirAsia from the start has set up a focal point, it's put up the passenger manifest, it's trying to comfort them during these very, very uncertain and, of course, understandably emotional hours. But as long as this search continues, there is hope being expressed by some of the relatives. But on the other hand, the longer it is taking, that hope seems to be dwindling, Edwin.
And James, there's already a growing concern that this could be turning into another MH370, and of course the disappearance of that is something that you covered for us at the time. Now, at this stage of the search for the AirAsia flight, can the two incidents in fact be compared?
Well, I think we're talking about two very different cases, Edwin. First of all, in the event of MH370, what we do know is that it seems to have been diverted. In the case of QZ8501, there's been no widespread suggestion that the plane was either taken hostage or commandeered. One suspected just could have been a terrible accident. In fact, that the hypothesis, and I stress this, that it's still only a hypothesis that AirAsia is working on, is that it could have just crashed and ended up at the bottom of the Java Sea. The Prime Minister of Australia, Tony Abbott, was asked this very question earlier in the day about whether there were any strong links between the two cases and whether comparisons could be drawn. And he said it would be a mistake to compare what he called the mystery of MH370 or the tragic shooting of MH17 with what we're seeing here now. QZ8501, by all accounts, did not steer off course. It flew exactly according to its charted route. It flew according to its time schedule. So we seem to be talking about very, very different circumstances, two very different sets of circumstances. But of course, the fact that AirAsia, one of Malaysia's biggest brand names, even though this is an aircraft, a service that belonged to its affiliate only, which is AirAsia Indonesia, is obviously giving rise to these comparisons. And one can imagine that the leaders of that search and rescue in Malaysia, in Singapore, where that plane was due to land, in Indonesia, in Australia, people must be very, very anxious at this hour. And of course, we've heard from the Chinese Foreign Ministry, its spokesman Hua Chunying standing to give China support, as has Washington.
All right, James, thank you very much indeed for the update.